tonight we are talking about how people failed.
Nailed it.
Got him.
This is the first time I sat down in 3 days. Like, to relax.
Oh.
I've been
about to have a lot of
painting
questions.
nonstop for 3 days.
Scrub that off.
I just left from that.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another non-failure episode of the Empire Radio Podcast. I'm Andrew,
I'm Jeremiah.
I'm Drew.
and you're right. You know it. You heard it correctly. We're talking about failure today. We're doing a cantina discussion about centered around failure, and I think it's gonna get deep. I think this is gonna be a really deep, insightful discussion. But we'll see. We'll see what happens when we get there. First and foremost, Drew, you said right before we started recording this that
I had a
you had
story
a
to tell.
story. Yeah.
Okay, so
Tell us the story. Start us off with a smooth story
With a banger.
with a banger.
so last night at 4 a.m., I was in a dream, and in the middle of the dream, I fell, and it's because my bed collapsed. And my bed collapsed at the same time I was in this dream, and I woke up, like, literally, I thought I was having a heart attack. It was so scary. It's like the scariest moment.
Wait. So your bed actually collapsed?
My bed actually collapsed at 4 o'clock this morning, and I was just...
Well, hold on. Before you continue, is Stephanie okay?
Yeah, well, it was like...
Her water broke when it fell.
Gosh.
So like, only, like, one half of it, like, it just caved in randomly. It's IKEA, dude. Don't buy an IKEA bed frame.
Don't do. First of all, they have some really shady
Yeah,
sustainability
it's the
things going on,
Malm
too.
one. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
Yeah.
So, like, for instance, we're, like, a foot off the ground, not even. Like, it's
Yeah.
not... But it was, like, it fell, and she was in the middle of a dream, too, and she's like, did the bed collapse, or did I just fall in my dream? And I was like,
Yeah.
no, I did, too. It was so scary.
You had to, like, spin a top or whatever to see if it would wobble.
Yeah,
or
I was
not.
like, Inception.
It was so weird. And so...
That's weird.
Yeah.
That kind of reminds me of a dream my dad had. He said he had a dream that a box elder bug was crawling around in his mouth, and when he woke up, a box elder bug,
Those, like...
the little black and orange, like,
June bug
square
thingies
ones.
that are everywhere.
It's a Minnesota thing. You wouldn't understand.
They're
But,
annoying. They're literally on everything, but yeah.
But he had a dream that one was crawling around in his mouth, and then the next day when he woke up, there was a dead box elder bug on his pillow.
That's disgusting. Well,
But yeah. Anyway, continue
Anyways,
discussion.
I don't know how we got here, but
I just
here.
I felt like it was worthy for everyone to hear.
And the reason he said that was because I broke my chair right before we started recording.
Yeah.
One of the 4 bolts holding in the legs to the bottom of my chair just like popped out of the chair. I don't know what happened, but I still have 3, so we're good.
Yeah.
So if he falls over in the middle of the podcast, we know why.
The other 3 just spontaneously broke. Yeah, IKEA. I wouldn't trust IKEA
For
anymore.
everything. Yeah. Not for everything. Not for your sleeping needs, I feel like.
No, I know they're not IKEA chairs. Yeah. Sorry, I think my wife was thought that I was implying that the chair that just broke was an IKEA chair. It's not an IKEA chair.
No.
We got these from
Don't buy a
someone else.
bed frame from IKEA. But granted,
Definitely not.
Granted, it's been like we got it when me and Stephanie got married, so it's been almost 7 years. So it's held up for a long time.
We've talked about this, but I forgot. When is your anniversary?
The 3rd of the year.
Oh, okay.
That's January 3rd.
Yeah, I just
Yeah,
like saying the 3rd of the
Yes, Jeremiah. It's January 3rd. Okay, because when you said we're coming up, I was like, maybe it's closer to mine, but it's not. It's months away. So mine's this month.
Ooh, well, happy early
Yeah.
anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you.
What
thank
is
you,
this,
thank you.
5?
5.
Ooh, I called it. 5's a
Yeah,
big
you did.
year. I feel like that's when you guys like renew your vows and do that stuff.
Did you do that?
No, we were going to do it.
Yeah,
In,
we're not.
we were going to do it in Japan, but then COVID happened.
Bruh. Big flex.
We were. We
Big flex.
we were gonna go like right before the Olympics, and yeah.
That's legit though. That's cool. That's really cool.
But now I'm here.
I just
Don't say it like it's a bad thing. Like but now I'm here.
I just renewed my apartment lease, so that's exciting.
Ooh,
Another year.
Good job, Jeremiah. Good job, Jeremiah.
another year down.
All right.
Anyway,
So cantina discussions. Let's jump in. So for those of you that are new, first of all, welcome. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching on Twitch. If you're new on Twitch, thank you for watching. If you're new on YouTube after the fact, well, you're probably like, what is he talking about? YouTube? Like, I just listened to the audio version. Well, we'll talk about that at the end of the episode. So hold your horses for now. But if you're new, thank you for being here. We're really excited to have you. And here's how cantina discussions work. One of the 3 of us. Normally we do these in groupings of 3. So we'll take 3 weeks and we each have an episode where we bring forth a question. That may or may not be the case this time, but for this episode, the example is I have a question, a discussion point. It can be about a theory, or it can be, I don't know, something really thought-provoking or whatever, and then I bring it forth and ask Jeremiah and Drew, and then we discuss it. That's the whole idea behind it, and they do not know what the question is unless they happen to look at the video thumbnail that I sent ahead of this episode. but in the past, they have no context really for what I'm going to ask, how I'm going to ask it, where the discussion is going to go. So that's the fun in these, is that it's spontaneous, and what you're getting is not scripted. It's very much. I mean, none of this is, but but it's fun. It's fun and it's off the cuff. So. Here's my question. So we had a voicemail from David last week. I think it was last week, about the Jedi and which era of Jedi we think sucked the most, essentially. So it really got me thinking, I've always liked, well, I would say up until recently, I've normally liked the Jedi way more than the Sith. Just because I tend to align naturally to the good side when it comes to stories like this. I have been rereading the Bane trilogy, and it's really cool. But that's beside the point. That's what's kind of swaying me the other direction. But for the most part, it's always been like I've aligned with the Jedi, the Rebellion, the Republic, et cetera, et cetera. But it's undeniable that the Jedi Order throughout all the generations in canon, and we'll leave this just to canon. I'm not going into EU. We're not doing that this time, unfortunately, everyone. Stop. Put your celebratory fist down, Jeremiah. So we know that undeniably there were flaws. There's some pretty big flaws in the Jedi. Obviously, those flaws in one way or another led them to be eradicated, to just kind of rip the Band-Aid off. It got them killed, most of them. And so between the Jedi that we see in the High Republic, because we have, regardless of the second book, we've all read the first book, so we have that common knowledge. Between those Jedi, between the prequel era Republic Jedi, and then obviously the Jedi of the old trilogy, the original trilogy, and the sequels, where did they go wrong? Like, what were the things, if you could pinpoint them, what were the failures? This is why I said we were talking about failures today. What were the failures of the Jedi as a whole that led to their destruction, that led to them being blind to what was happening, to even if you wanted to go so far to mistreating Anakin and his situation, like what were all of these flaws, if you could name just a few predominant ones, that led to their ultimate demise, and then the prevention of the order kind of being as good as it could have been following the fact. And then what would you do? What would you say that they could have done to fix those things? This is kind of a two-parter. What were the failures? What could they have done differently? I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, so we, like you kind of mentioned, we got slightly spoiled on what the topic would be tonight.
Yeah.
So it was.
I didn't think about that.
So it was funny because I saw a meme just before I saw that spoiler that kind of addressed this, and so I don't know. So it's basically it's just looks like a screenshot from a book, and then it just has like the meme underneath it. But I'm assuming it's one of the canon Dooku books, maybe. And I'll just read what it says. It says, "The Jedi Order's problem is Yoda. No being can wield that kind of power for centuries without becoming complacent at best or corrupt at worst. He has no idea that it's overtaken him. He no longer sees all the little cumulative evils that the Republic tolerates and fosters, from slavery to endless wars, and he never asks, why are we not acting to stop this? Live alongside corruption for too long, and you will no longer notice the stench. The Jedi cannot help the slaves of Tatooine, but they can help the slave masters." And it says underneath, Dooku, Yoda's former Padawan, to Darth Sidious.
Dang.
Oof.
So is that from one of the Dooku books or something? Or comics or something?
I don't know. I don't remember that line in Dooku Jedi Lost. It could have been there. It's been a while since I listened to that audiobook.
I feel like you would remember that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's
pretty
a hot take
intense.
though. Yeah, that's
But I
pretty
like
intense.
it. I actually really like that take.
Yeah.
So basically, you know, like when you, like just like even like in our lives, like when you just see, things going on in the world that are not good.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you first see it for the first time, like you can say like, yes, this is wrong, and you might act upon it or something. But then if it's something you see on a regular basis, you get kind of numb to it. And so it's like, we see all the stuff that happen in the news all the time, and it's like every night you see the same issues, and so it's like you lose interest in it, you just turn it off or don't even watch the news at all anymore. And so like that could have been what happened with the Jedi leading up to Sidious, acting his mastermind of a plan, where they were just used to so many issues in the Republic, and they were kind of maintaining their ideals. Because like we see, in Clone Wars Season 7, when we hear Trace and Rafa's backstory about how their parents were killed, like Luminara just kind of went to them and said, hey, sorry, but no, the Force is with you, type of thing. And it's just like they got to that point where their ideology was more important to them than them caring for the people. And like we see, so I've read the first, like we said, I read the first New Republic or
High Republic
novel, and I'm like a third of a way through the second book right now. And it's very like the first, especially in the first book, like all the Jedi are eager to help people. Like they just go out there and they'll just do whatever. Like I can't remember who it was in the first book, but it was just like we need your help. Okay, tell me what you want me to do. Like there was no like, oh, I'm sorry, we can't. This is too complicated. Like I have to ask the Jedi Council. Like no, it's like there's a problem, let's fix it. Mm-hmm. And like with like towards the beginning of that book when you got hundreds of Jedi throughout the galaxy, combining their powers together to stop the thing. Like a bunch of them died doing it because it strained them so. Like they cared so much about saving just a handful of people's lives that like they gave their life for it. But like when we get to the prequel era, like how many Jedi were willing to do such a thing? Oh, Drew's mic is making an appearance. He's getting
Oh,
riled
boy.
up over there.
Oh boy.
So it's just like it's one of those things, like that quote said. This is like when you see the corruption over and over again for centuries, you get numb to it. And so like maybe as great as Yoda was, if they put term limits, like where like the Grand Masters that were leading the council, if they
Yeah.
could only do it for 10, 20 years, and then they had to rotate out to get a fresh take on things and whatnot, it would have been able to keep their eyes open to the injustices or the things that they could progress more. But I don't know.
That's interesting that you say that, because the goal of the council was to have a fresh perspective, and you did have longer sitting members of the council. But obviously, like even just within the prequels, the council changed in a few different ways. There were members that got swapped in. Obi-Wan got added. Yaddle was killed, at least in the expanded universe. Like all these things different. All these different things changed. And you would think that the different voices would come in and cause some sort of a shift in ideology. But I think, and this kind of leads into one of the things, I have a few points, but this leads into one of them. I don't think that the Jedi were good at allowing people to share opinions. So you mentioned there was this overarching ideology of the Force and how it works and their place in the cosmic force and all this stuff. And then you had people like Quinlan Vos and Qui-Gon, Dooku earlier before he defected, who rocked the boat because they had differentiating opinions. They were the black sheep, if you will, of the Jedi Order. And I think that among the council, there wasn't a lot of playing devil's advocate. There wasn't a lot of sharing differentiating opinions and not arguing, but I guess challenging one another to think about a different perspective. And then it would just default to Yoda, and they'd be like, okay, cool. Like they would have some sort of a discussion, then Yoda would be like, nah, we need to do this. And they're like, okay, cool, we'll just do that. Not to say that they shouldn't have respected the Grand Master of the Order.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as a whole, and this shows as a reflection in the High Council, that the Jedi, I don't know if they actively taught to suppress those things, those ideologies, those differentiating opinions, or if it was just kind of taboo to voice those things. But I think if enough people, like for example, here's a spoiler for the Master and Apprentice novel. So you've been warned.
Okay.
Sorry, Drew.
No.
Qui-Gon Jinn gets offered a position on the council.
Ooh.
Yeah, and this is canon, by the way. This is not EU.
Ooh.
And part of his internal tension in that book is like him and Obi-Wan are actually not having a good time. Like they're in a rocky point in their relationship. And Qui-Gon's like doubting himself as a master. Obi-Wan's kind of doubting himself as an apprentice.
How long is this before episode 1?
Gosh, I don't remember. It's been so long since I've read that
Because
book.
Obi-Wan would have been, what was he, like 25 in episode 1 or something like that?
I don't remember. He's in his like early 20s for sure.
Yeah.
But I know that it wasn't long. It wasn't distant in the distant past. Like they were relatively the same age.
Okay.
So it was probably within a few years. I'm sure someone in the Twitch chat will be able to tell me. But it was very interesting because like Qui-Gon's warring with this because he's like, obviously I have a very different opinion, and I think we've lost our way. But do I leave Obi-Wan and risk the chance of not being able to train him for this council position? Because like council members did have apprentices, but it was very rare. Like normally they didn't for the most part. And so he's like, do I go onto the council and voice my opinion and be that black sheep that kind of pushes the boundaries a little bit? Because like there are other Jedi that were telling him in the book, like you could do a lot of good on the council. Like your perspective would matter, but he ends up not doing it. And so, I've always thought that Qui-Gon and even some of Dooku's earlier views, I mean, obviously, even some of his later views were spot on. And they all kind of revolve around the things that the Jedi either turned a blind eye to, the way you were saying, Jeremiah, or they denied. So, like, I'm a firm believer, like this even matters because the Force isn't a thing, but I'm a firm believer. Oh, thanks, Daddy Pops. It takes place 8 years before the Phantom Menace, so it's a pretty good chunk of time. But I'm a firm believer that true strength in the Force lies actually in between the stereotypical light and dark sides in sort of a, gray Jedi manner, because obviously we see the sheer raw power of drawing on your emotions and using your emotions to fuel the Force in the Sith. Especially, again, I'm not going to hit on it too deeply, but like especially in these Bane novels, like some crazy dark side stuff happens, and it's all because of the dark side of the Force and like using his anger and his hatred. So there's power in emotions like that, which the Jedi like completely were like, no, you got to keep those in check. Like there's no passion, there's only peace. In the Jedi code, and at the same time, the Sith, unchecked, those things ruled them, and they just went unhinged. Like they were ruled by the desires to kill and to be ruthless and cunning and destroy their enemies, and they craved power. And I think you need to find a balancing point between the two of those. And so all that to say, I think the Jedi did a really bad job of like denying some of the things that could have made them stronger if they had been kept in check. And like, there's this splitting hairs and like a gray area between like, you've heard Jedi, we're meant to feel compassion towards others, but we're not meant to have attachments. And I'm like, really? Like, I get it that obviously romantic attachments for a Jedi really complicates things. But like, honestly, I will go on the record to say that if Anakin's relationship with Padme hadn't have been in secret behind closed doors.
I thought you were going to say ensign.
Stop.
I did.
If Anakin and Padme's relationship hadn't been taboo and they hadn't had to have keeping it, a secret the whole time, I don't think Anakin would have been Darth Vader.
I agree with that.
So, like, and there's a lot of parallels that I could even draw to some real world things like our faith. But at the same time, like, I think Jeremiah, you're 100% right. I think they became complacent.
Numb.
Yeah. And they lost their overall, I guess, the point of them being there,
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I think internally they did a really bad job of like balancing the things that made them sentient beings, which in them of themselves were not bad things, but they taught them to be bad things. It's like we talked about before how one of their biggest failings was Anakin. Like if you want me to pinpoint one instead of talking in kind of more sweeping generalities, Anakin is one of the Jedi's biggest failures.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I think they could have done a lot more, and they could have prevented him from going to the dark side. I mean, not to mention that it didn't really seem like therapy was a thing at all in the Star Wars universe. But that's beside the point. Like, I think he could have, a lot of the Jedi could have done well to get some of that. But like, and I say that as someone who has personally benefited from it, so I'm not speaking from an outside perspective. Want to make that clear. But I think that if they had allowed Anakin to ask questions and had allowed him to be honest with them and not completely cast him away, like, as hard as it would be, like, him sitting down with Yoda and being like, hey, I just wiped out a group of Tusken Raiders. Like, sure, that's awkward and it's really terrifying,
like,
and you have to deal with the consequences of that.
It's funny that you mentioned it because didn't he shared that information with Palpatine?
Yep.
Right.
Because he says, like, I remember what you told me you did to those same people on Tatooine.
Exactly.
Like, so like
Yeah.
And who did he align himself with?
he became best friends, almost best friends with Palpatine.
Exactly.
Like, he was his mentor
Yeah.
because he allowed him to express his emotions in a safe way. Yes,
Right.
they were manipulated, but like he
But
didn't
he had
have
no one
that,
else to lean on, though.
like he had Padme, but
Well,
like his,
I mean,
but like
her
even
help
then, like,
at this
that's all
point
in
is
secret.
irrelevant because it's like
Yeah.
going to someone, that has no idea what you're truly going through, because there's a level of depth that she could never understand because she wasn't force sensitive and she wasn't indoctrinated with the Jedi's principles and their teachings, and there's even a moment, and I'm realizing now that I can't actually talk about it because it's in the second book of the High Republic series, but there's a moment where something happened. All I'm going to say, to avoid any sort of spoilers, is the Jedi handle things much better in that time than they do in the prequels.
Yeah.
Overall, I would say that they do.
Is there
I'd say they're a stronger.
I was gonna say, is there a council at that time?
Yeah, there's 3 Grand Masters on the
Yeah.
council.
Oh yeah. Jarl Poof was one of the.
Yeah.
He was still on the council then. Like, he's been on the council the whole time, Mr. Q-Tip.
Dang.
Dang, Mr.
But-
Q-tip.
Bro,
But
he looks just like a Q-tip.
Yoda wasn't though, right? Or was he?
Yeah, he was one of the Grand Masters.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah.
But like, there's this mystery because like everybody's like, we don't know where Yoda is. He's off doing something. He's blah blah. It's just this mysterious thing. But like, I think they could like just sit Anakin down and let him ask questions.
Yeah.
Like, why do I feel this? I'm having instead of him coming to Yoda and being like, I'm having visions of people close to me dying, and Yoda didn't ask a single specific question. He didn't probe at all. And all he said was, calm your mind. They'll pass with time. That's it?
Yeah.
You're the most powerful Jedi in the known universe at the time. And there's no like, you know what? I believe this guy's the chosen one, so maybe I should ask him what's going on.
You don't think
Maybe
a
I
lot of
should
that
ask-
was the dark side blinding him, though?
Here's what I would say about that. And that's kind of a fallback and a crutch.
Well,
One that I believe
just wrote
believe
that
in.
down as something I want to talk about too. So
I will say I do believe that was taking place, and I
Yeah.
believe that was a real thing that was preventing them from
Seeing the bigger picture.
correct and acting. However, some of these things are like just interpersonal things. Like, we're not talking
Yeah.
about the Force. It's like if let's just say, me, my wife and I, like, we're each other's best friends. We know each other. We're as intimately as a human can, and we know each other best. And so if she comes to me and says something's wrong, or she's dealing with something, I'm not going to be like, it'll be fine, and then I just go do something else. It's like, no, sure, it may be fine, but talk to me about it. Like,
Let's work out. Let's like figure this out.
like, can I help you? What are you feeling? Like, that sort of a thing. And so with Yoda and Anakin, sure, they weren't best friends, but it's like, you're the Grand Master of the Order. And when someone comes to you, one of your Jedi Knights comes to you, especially one as powerful as Anakin, Like this dude was unequaled in the Force at the time.
Yeah.
Like, sure, you've got a lot of stuff to do, but at the end of the day, like I think Jeremiah, you made a good point when you were talking about the Jedi being so eager to help in the High Republic. Like that was just not a thing. Outside from like Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, and Anakin, like some of the core characters of the universe, like
Right.
we didn't see that a ton with the other Jedi, and so I don't know. I feel like they could have done a better job of that, but like obviously Anakin was a failure. But the other thing is, like I don't know. I don't. I think they still could have gotten involved in the war, but their allegiance should not have been to the Republic.
It should have been the people of the planet that they were helping.
Correct.
It shouldn't
So
have been.
I'm
And-
splitting
and
hairs a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's the difference between the High Republic Jedi and the Jedi that fell, is
Yeah.
that their allegiance in the High Republic is like you can tell highly like they care about those people and the people
And
that
it's to the Force too.
and the Force,
Yeah.
but also like the people that those situations are happening to. They're more allegiant to them as like people of the planet that they're working on, or the
Yeah.
certain missions that are saving those people, instead of like one core group. And so maybe it is the Republic that made them fall, and that was like in hindsight the whole thing was being controlled by
Yeah.
a Sith, but at the same time their allegiance to the Republic was so high it trumped everything.
Well, that was one of Qui-Gon's points. Was like, yo, we've misplaced our allegiance. Like we've become too directly tied to politics and to the Republic and to the Senate, and we've allowed that to take front seat to the role of the will of the Force.
Yeah.
And I think that because of what the Republic stood for, I think they still would have ended up on the same side of the war. But
Well,
then there's
yeah,
there's
for
not
sure.
there's not this viewing of separatists as these evil people. It's like, no, we're peacekeepers first.
Correct.
We're not generals aligned to the Republic side.
Yeah.
And everyone, and there's a few different times, obviously I'm paraphrasing, but in the High Republic novels, the Jedi are like, they stress that all sentient life is valuable. And the ecosystems that they make up is valuable and it's worth protecting. And I think that like instead of being like pew pew, if it's a separatist it gets shot, like instead of like this rallying behind defending the Republic, it's like, no, we need to keep the peace, and we're going to align ourselves with the Force, the light side of the Force. The Republic definitely stands for that, but then they also have to be the ones on the opposite side to be the voice of reason if they begin seeing corruption within the Republic. Like they have to be willing to say, hey, you guys are not doing this well, and here's what we think. You can take it, you can leave it, but as advisors to the Senate, as a force of good and of light and of reason, here's what we're seeing from a third party perspective, and it's not good, and we need to check ourselves before we have a Sith Lord rise to power underneath our nose and kill us all.
Because like you can even see that in the beginning of episode 1, right? Like there was no good. There was like they went there to figure out why they didn't want to do a peace treaty.
They were sent as ambassadors to the
Yeah.
Republic.
Yeah.
That's not a Jedi's role.
True, but it's like also like to think of like they weren't mad at them yet. Like, you know what I mean? Like they weren't there to like. They were just trying to
Correct.
figure out what was going on and why these people were attacking
Yeah.
this planet. In a sense of like they were trying to figure it out, and they instantly got attacked, obviously, and they picked a side that was more. I feel like it almost seems like they also picked a side that was more, had more control. Like they picked the Republic side because there was more people agreeing with the way the public was doing things instead of. Like, have you ever thought that maybe those people were acting as rebels against the Republic? Like,
I think I see what you're trying to get at. And
Like the
yes.
separatists,
Like-
because there's the arc where Padme and Ahsoka go meet with like Lux Von
Mm-hmm.
Tari or whatever, and
Bontiri, yeah.
Bontiri, and
Yeah.
like Ahsoka, like at the beginning, thinks that the Separatists are evil,
Yeah.
but at the end of the arc, she's like has a crush on Lux and like realizes that the Separatists are just people that want peace for their people.
Yeah.
Because like we think, I think it's easy to assume that the Separatists were just these like
Puppets.
like they were just like the droids only with
Yeah.
like there was and led by Dooku or whatever. Like you think of it that way, but they're groups, they're systems that separated themselves from the Republic because of the issues that they saw.
Yeah.
Yes, it was a manipulated division at the end of the day, but like these people still believed that the Republic was going in a direction that wasn't good, and so they
Yeah.
wanted to have like a civil war. And
Yeah.
so like even the existence of a war and ideological differences between both sides, like the Jedi could have been, well, why did these people leave?
Right.
Yeah. Like take it
Yeah.
more of a global thing and like break it up and figure out why did they first separate from the Republic, and like go through it that way and talk it. And I feel like in the High Republic that is more of a thing, not
Oh, yeah.
necessarily like that's
100%.
happening, but it's more of like let's take people as a group of like a planet, like this planet, like as a like that's a group, right? And then let's work on it and figure it out. But they clearly weren't doing that, and a lot of that probably did have a lot to do with like this the workings of Palpatine behind scenes, and they're blinded. But that quote with about Yoda, I've never even thought of that, and that really was pretty intense. Like that's a really intense thought.
But here's a question I was just thinking of. So, because we were talking about how the Jedi were too close to, like, their identity ended up being tied to the Republic rather than to their own order.
Yeah.
Do you think that if the primary Jedi Temple was not on Coruscant,
They wouldn't
they
have.
would have not been so tied to the Republic?
I-
Because the
yeah.
Coruscant was the capital of the galaxy,
Yeah.
and so it was the political hub of the galaxy.
Well, not
so
to mention they were like a short fly away from the Senate building. Like even the proximity on
You
the
could see
planet.
it through it. Like
yeah,
they could see it through
like-
their window.
yeah,
like-
so like I wonder like how things would play out if they were spread out throughout the galaxy at all the different Jedi temples. Like
Yeah.
like I guess one like we see the Jedi temple on Lothal in Rebels. Like what if they had
People there.
100 Jedi there at a constant time, just like using that temple to.
Well, that's what they're doing in the High Republic. They have outposts all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, and to be fair, like a lot of that has to do with expansion, but like I think now that Tython is a canon thing, I think they could have had like my question is why not put it on a world that is more attuned to the Force? If your allegiance
Is the Force.
is the Force first and foremost, then why would you not choose to do that? And I agree, Jeremiah. I think it would have been different.
I agree
because-
too. I think it's a lot where you're in that situation. If you like people like with politics in general, like they have a better perspective of it when they take a step back and look at the bigger picture. But when you're so connected and you're so in that zone, you can never actually see the bigger picture because you're just fixated on one side of it.
Yeah.
And I feel
Yeah.
like when you're more, if the Jedi were more spread out between different, or just not even on that planet, they could have saw it as a bigger picture than just what was going on and just that. And Palpatine clearly wouldn't have had as much control over them too.
It's really interesting. I'm gonna refrain from elaborating on this too much, but I think the tenets of the light side of the Force, I agree with a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, I think the Jedi interpreted those, some of them poorly. Or at least the tenets that I know of the, because obviously I'm not an expert on what the Jedi believed. I haven't read the little handbook that you can buy at Barnes and Noble, but like,
Well, we
I
should.
do know that the teachings of the light side of the Force were they surrounded good things, the things of good, the forces of good, of peace, of tranquility, knowledge, and wisdom, like all the things that you hope would be at the core of your teachings. But I think over time, that got very intermingled with the ideology, and then, for lack of a better phrase, nationalism. Some of the aspects of that of the Republic itself, and I think it began to be a little tainted. It wasn't, we're following the will of the Force exclusively, we're studying the Force exclusively. It's like, no, we're keeping a line on politics because we feel we have to be the galactic police force. And also, we're aligning ourselves somewhat blindly with the Republic because the Republic is, quote, good.
Mm-hmm.
When again, I'll go back to my point and the other points that both of you have made. I think they needed to be in the middle, and they had to be far enough removed to be able to ask the hard questions of like, whoa, guys, this isn't good. And we're saying this out of love. We're saying this because we love the Republic, and obviously, like, the Republic itself is a good thing. But there's a lot of stuff happening that's not good, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they became the military leaders of the army, like, that's
This
a pretty
army
telling
that showed
sign.
up out of nowhere.
Yeah, like, it's a pretty telling sign.
What was in the High Republic novels? What was the catchphrase? Was it "We are one people" or what?
We are all the Republic.
We are all the Republic. So maybe that's where that started. Is the Jedi were part of that? We are all the Republic. Like, they saw themselves as citizens of the Republic rather than as citizens of the Jedi Order or whatever, and that's where it all started. That marrying of
Yeah.
their ideology to the Republic, and that's where things started to compromise.
Yeah. That is an interesting point. I looked down while you were speaking, and Daddy Palps put in the chat the quote from Obi-Wan from Revenge of the Sith: "My allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy." And that is a pretty, in the literal sense of the word, damning phrase of where he was at the time. You know, and to be fair, like, Obi-Wan, I think was one of the more separated or not as indoctrinated Jedi.
Well, he does say at the beginning, after they rescue Palpatine, like, Anakin goes ahead with the politics, like, "Oh, I'm not that kind of person." Like, what does he say?
Oh, I'm not brave enough for politics. Or
Yeah,
something
that's
like
something
that.
like
Yeah.
that.
I think because of Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan was a little bit more separated, but even still, that was very telling of where he was at
Yeah.
the time, where the Jedi Order was as a whole. So I think that's one of their failures. I think they were too involved. Or, well,
But didn't Padme and Anakin have a conversation about this too? When Anakin was slowly like leaving, like becoming Vader, Padme was like, the way he was describing the Republic wasn't the way the Republic actually ran.
I vaguely remember that. I don't remember the specifics.
It
Of
was
the
like,
conversation, though.
trying to think.
I just remember them sitting in the flower in the fields.
Yeah, okay, well,
and like
with the
when there was that
cows,
scene-
yes, I
no, but
know.
like when he's saying, like, she's like, "That sounds
Yeah,
a lot
yeah.
like a dictatorship." He's like, and he's like, "Well, basically, I guess not that. What if it was like type of thing?" But
Like, yeah, he wanted a more like a dictatorship, and that's the way that the Republic was going, and that's why Padme was slowly like,
Yeah.
like towards the end, you can tell that Padme was not where, like, even Palpatine wanted her to be, and she was realizing it because, well, for one, he stayed way longer than his term, but like,
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean, like, towards the end of it all, like, Padme was still grounded in the original way that the Republic was running, but even the members of the Senate of the Republic weren't that way anymore.
Some of them
And
weren't. Yeah.
yeah, and I feel like those people that because it like they all
mean, really,
cheered at the end, right? Like they all.
I mean, to be fair, the people that still weren't completely on board were most of the ones who formed the rebellion. So,
Exactly.
you know,
So it was just like, and like, remember, like this is how it ends with thunderous applause.
oh
Like,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so like, but that's like, I feel like by the time that happened, the Jedi was already gone too. Like, in that situation, like, they weren't there either, cause like they were kind of questioning Palpatine,
well,
and
when he declared the Galactic Empire, many of the Jedi were dead. So
exactly. So it's just like,
yeah,
I don't know. It just shows you like the Jedi were completely blind, and a lot of it probably did have to do with that. But if they took a step back earlier, maybe they wouldn't have been as blind, and they would have been able to fight through the dark side blinding them.
yeah, yeah. I think there's a difference in like there's a distinction that needs to be made between fighting a war for the sake of the Republic and fighting a war because there's a threat to peace.
Mm-hmm.
And a pirate uprising like the Nihil, that's a threat.
Yeah,
You need to take care of that threat because that is an open threat
to
to many
everyone.
worlds, to many different types of people, to many sentient species. That's an example of a threat. Natural disasters, relief aid, stuff like that. Stuff where they can go in and do things with the Force in helping others that no one else can because they don't have the Force. That's when you step in and you act. If the separatists receded and then decided to start attacking things unprovoked, you go those places first. But at the end of the day, you follow the need of where peacekeeping is. You follow to those places where you can actually help and you can actually bring peace instead of being the generals
Mm-hmm.
of these massive military operations. At least in my opinion, it's not as much I'm fighting with the Republic because the Republic's good by default. No, you're fighting because people are dying. Innocent people are dying that don't need to die. Like there's gosh, what book was it? It was a canon book. What book? It
It's
was
hard for him to think because he reads so many non-canon books.
no, it's not. No, I just read so many books in general. You dingleberry.
Dingleberry.
No.
Oh, that's
Anyways,
uncalled for.
no, because there's a book that there's like a refugee ship, and they're under attack by the separatists, and there's like the main character for the first like chapter is this little girl or a younger person of a species, and like they go to the cockpit and they're there with the Jedi Master when the hologram of Dooku comes up, and the Jedi Master is like pleading for Dooku to leave them, like take the whatever, just let us pass because these are innocent people. And Dooku like straight up is like, nah, sorry, and blows the ship up. And like you're there personally with this younger being as
What
the
book
ship
is
explodes.
this? This sounds familiar.
It's not Dark Disciple.
I feel like I've read this myself.
It's not Jedi. It's not Dooku Jedi Lost, because it takes place during the Clone Wars. In part, it's not Master and Apprentice. Gosh, what is it? It's gonna bother me. It's gonna
Is
really
it the
bother
second Thrawn book?
me. Maybe. I don't know. It's canon though. Like I know it's
No,
canon.
I think I've read this too because I remember this.
All of that to say, you step in because innocent people are dying.
Yes.
Regardless of their past, regardless of if they're a smuggler or a bounty hunter or what, like if their life isn't threatened and they're not actively threatening other people, you go and protect them because that's part of the will of the Force, and respecting and protecting all beings. And speaking of the will of the Force, like if you need good coffee, you get Wesley Andrews. And I that's just what I think. So I think we should take a moment really quickly and listen to a word from the sponsor of today's episode, Wesley Andrews Coffee and Tea. Hey everyone.
I was gonna make some weird segue too, if you weren't gonna do it.
Andrews Coffee and Tea.
That's funny.
If you don't know anything about Wesley Andrews,
I just love Jeremiah's reactions every time because he's like into it, and then he's like,
they make fantastic coffee.
Bruh.
Comes out of nowhere.
Bruh.
Subscription service that gets those amazing coffee beans delivered to
just like the caffeine when you drink Wesley Andrews, it comes out of nowhere.
Unfortunately, we're all being negatively affected by this virus right now.
We have no mods in the chat either.
Time to try some new coffee and support a local business. I know they'll greatly appreciate it, and we will too. After all, using the code Empire Radio with a capital E. That's gonna really bother me now.
Yeah,
I don't know
what
what
book is that?
New subscription at
If David was here, he would find it.
CC. You'll get 50% off your first purchase. I can't think of a better deal. Get 50% off, support a local Minneapolis coffee shop, and support your favorite Star Wars podcast. In the words of Emperor Palpatine, do it.
Do it.
Do it.
Do it.
So, you're talking about how there was the fine line between them fighting because people were in need and fighting with the Republic in the war. Because, like, there's a lot of overlap with that because
There is.
like,
That's true.
There is. Yeah.
And so that's where the complexity lies because I would have to go back and rewatch Attack of the Clones, but like Yoda and the Council did not want to get involved with this conflict. They didn't want to be part of a war.
Yeah,
That's fair.
that's fair.
But like it came out of nowhere so fast for them that Yoda felt like they needed to join with the clones because the threat was so high throughout the galaxy.
Mm.
And it's like he didn't want to do it, but he's like, the Jedi themselves cannot stop all these droids, basically, and these conflicts. Like it's too big for the Jedi.
Yeah.
And so like he felt like he had no choice. He thought that he was doing it to help people.
Yeah.
And so like obviously this is part of Palpatine's plan. So it's like we can't forget how this is a two-sided thing. It's not just they fell because of a war, but like,
Right.
What I was thinking about was how, like, kind of along the lines of the quote that I've had about Yoda getting complacent, but like I think them having peace for so long also caused it like when such a large conflict came
about.
They didn't know how to react properly.
Mhm.
It's like that scene in The Office where Michael Scott is like, oh my god, it's happening. It's all right, everyone, it's happening. And they all get up and they're like leaving.
Yeah.
That reminds me. It's like
That's
the
like
Jedi
the
were that way. It's like, oh
best-
gosh, it's happening.
Yeah, so it's like,
Yeah.
like okay, so there's something I've always thought was weird about Star Wars, and then what was actually brought up in the second High Republic book, which is not really spoilerly, but in the High Republic, there's like I think it's like a flashback of Bell being trained with a lightsaber and dueling, and they're like joking like how like this is pointless, like we don't do this anymore, like learning how to fight.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's like I've always wondered that like Jedi train to duel other lightsabers,
But they don't do that anymore.
but they don't do that. Like that's not part of like you're training them, assuming that there's going to be other Force users that are going to be using lightsabers, but it's like they never really thought that it was going to actually happen. It's a weird thing about the Jedi. Like they train
in
to
the
use
expanded
lightsabers.
universe.
Yeah,
because it would be. He said, "Yeah." I just looked down at the chat. Daddy Pops, everybody stay calm. That's hilarious. It's a good episode. But in the expanding universe, they had more than enough reason to at least be paranoid enough to continue to train the Jedi, because the Sith were quote extinct, and then they came back at least one other time before they did in the Rule of Two era, if you will. And so, like even like we were talking about with the Darth Bane trilogy, Bane destroys the Sith as they are, and it leads the Jedi to believe that they're gone. But then at the same time, I can't imagine them being like, oh well, guess we don't need our lightsabers anymore. Like that would be very
Right.
irresponsible of them, to say the least.
But yeah, so it's just
It's a good point, though. It really is.
because the war did really come out of nowhere for them because like, and like,
Well,
what do you
and
do?
several years later too, because like when this first came about, Anakin was a young kid and was like what, 10 years something later when it actually happened. Like from episode 1 to episode 2, like there was a big
it's
chunk
10
of
years.
Yeah. So it's like it didn't work right away for them either, you know. So it took about 10 more years. And if you think about like episode 1, they went to Naboo because they were Naboo was getting attacked, and they fought with
Or
the
they were
people.
being blockaded.
Or they're being blockaded, yes.
Yeah.
And then they fought with the people of Naboo to help them alongside them to save them essentially. And so like that version of the Jedi was they were doing it correct, right?
Well, and I think one thing that people, you have a good point. One thing people don't, I think it's easy to take the prequels as a whole and being like, oh yeah, it's the Clone Wars. Well, it's not.
No.
Like episode 1, it was technically a trade dispute, and that wasn't the beginning of an intergalactic.
It was
war.
just the Boston Tea Party, you know.
Not even it wasn't even on that scale. Like it was like because like even the Trade Federation senators in the Senate were like, we don't know what is happening. You know, like they were playing the.
That's a pretty good.
That was a good one. We
yeah,
don't know.
I try sometimes, but they were like playing the fool. I mean, they knew,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it was like, oh no, it's this rogue group of Trade Federation people that decided to blockade Naboo, and then the Jedi were just intervening because they were peacekeepers.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
in that situation it worked and they were doing their job as peacekeepers. They only got involved because they desperately had to at the end. And I'm pretty sure didn't the Jedi Council still not even want them involved? If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And kind of
Yeah, until freaking Maul shows up, and then they're like,
oh,
this is actually kind of our problem.
yeah.
A Sith Lord, like from Windu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like it shows you like Jeremiah was saying, like there was peace literally up until that moment. And then like after
I mean, to be fair, there was in all technicality for a few years after that too.
Oh yeah, like I mean we heard the stories like when they're in the elevator going up to see Padme, and right away in episode 2, like they're talking about how there is situations where they had to go, Obi-Wan and Luke got into situations where they had to help each other, blah blah blah, you know.
You mean
Or
Anakin?
Anakin, yeah, sorry, Anakin. And so like yes, of course other things happen behind the scenes that we didn't see. But there were still peacekeepers at that point, and like, yeah, the war did come out of nowhere, and they were trying to save peace, and also like they also went there full force too to save Anakin and Obi-Wan because they were captured. You know, like there's a lot that happened in that moment. But to just take that and go with it, and like that was the side that they're choosing because it was a threat to the Republic instead of stepping back and still trying to be peacekeepers in certain spots, they became the head of the army, and everyone had their own battalion behind them, and like it went from like being there and showing up and helping civilians to making sure they run the army correctly. You know, it was like a completely different style of the Jedi, and that's not what they're meant to do.
I think there is a point, again, from the expanding universe, where having the Jedi at the helm of an attack force does work.
Oh, it worked. I think it worked a lot.
But what I mean is, sorry, I'll rephrase that. There is a time in the expanded universe where I think having them at the helm of an attack force is justified. And that is during the Sith Wars, when it was the Republic and the Jedi versus the Sith and their armies. So like when the Sith had troops, like legit troops that they were in, conscripting from different places in the universe that were anti-Republic. I think that's justifiable when the other side, there are many hundreds of Force users. Like there's legitimate practical justification for jumping into a battle, realizing the Sith are using battle meditation and destroying your forces, and then you doing the same thing to counteract it, which happens in the Bane novel, the first one. Like there's just practical justification for that. You go into a land battle where you're fighting, you got thousands of soldiers with guns, but then all of a sudden there's a few Sith lords intermingled in there, and they're just wrecking people. Obviously, you have Jedi masters there to even the odds. But again, that's not canon, and we still haven't seen a time in which the Jedi were fighting a large scale battle against other Force users in canon yet.
Yeah.
And so it does work. It can be justifiable, but not when a war. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't have been involved at all, but I also think there could have been some legitimate victories without them there. Because like they had brilliant commanders that were non-clones, and they had brilliant clone commanders and generals, well, captains and commanders there that had great strategic minds. So, and at the end of the day, really, did the Jedi actually help win the war? You could argue for no, because of the way it turned out. But yeah, I mean, Jeremiah, going back to your point, there's a lot to be given to Palpatine when it comes to credit for this. There is. I'm not saying that if the Jedi were different, this could have been avoided. But also, like, and to be fair, we don't have a ton of canon context for what I'm about to say either way, so take it with a grain of salt. But it didn't seem like they did a ton of like actual investigating into the Sith Lord. It's like, oh dang, at the end of the Phantom Menace, always two there are, no more, no less. Like Yoda says that himself. And then did they look? Did they like, hey, maybe we should, I don't know, maybe we should look into this. Like, oh, there's someone. Did he have a red lightsaber? Yeah, he did. Okay, well, that's a pretty telltale sign. Was he a Force user? Yep. Okay, well, someone trained him, so that's interesting. Right?
Well, it's like, but like, how do you investigate that though?
You start sending people out and like start hitting certain, because like, sure, the Sith were in hiding, right? But they still had to have connections to operate. They still had to. There had to have been things that were suspicious. Like, for example, spoiler alert for the later Bane novels. Even though we kind of did the whole thing last week, but there's. I'll go into a little bit more detail. So he becomes this Sith artifact collector, right? And he starts pulling in all of these artifacts from this contact that he has, who is supposedly an expert in Sith antiquities, and he's doing that to gain knowledge about the Sith traditions and to get his hands on artifacts that could help him and aid him in his cause and all these things. And like at a certain point, like the Jedi could go in, send someone like Quinlan Voss in. Obviously, this is easier said than done, but tap into those the underground kind of black market networks and be like, okay, anything suspicious happening? Is there anybody buying up Sith artifacts? Because if so, we should probably start there. And then you get your hands on certain things and you're like, oh, this talks about this one place. Maybe we should go there. Like, it's disgustingly difficult. And you're dealing with a galaxy-wide, pretty much a needle in a haystack search. But it's like, the other thing is that they have the Force. And if they got away from Coruscant long enough and meditated, you never know what the Force might show them. So...
Possibly.
Yeah.
It's possible.
I guess when I think of Palpatine, I feel like he was very not doing underground stuff. Like, because I don't know.
Not after he got into politics. Dude, him and Plagueis. Okay, never mind. I already hear it. It's not canon. It doesn't matter. Anyways, in canon, you're correct. There's no evidence that we have that he was like doing shady stuff on the side.
But yeah, so that's like my point. Like, how do you, like, if he's not, if I don't know, how old was? Okay, fine. I have to ask a question about Plagueis now. But, how old was
Palpatine.
or how long before Episode 1 did Palpatine become Plagueis's apprentice?
He was in his late teens.
Yeah, it was like I think it was like 17. I thought.
Bro, Plagueis got him young. And then he straight up kills his whole family.
Yep.
Or I think he had done that before. I don't remember, dude. It's been a long time since I read that novel. I actually,
The Plagueis novel. I mean, it's not canon,
but
but
it's so good.
it's
so
it's
good.
like the one EU book that I will support.
Yeah. But he got him pretty young, and then like straight up groomed him to be a politician
Yeah.
while training him in the dark side.
Yeah, so it's like that's the thing. Like he's out in the open.
Out in a boot.
So it's like it's not a secret thing. Like he's out in the open.
Oh, that's right. Thank you, Daddy Pops. He kills his family in order to be taken as a apprentice. That's right.
Yes, that's what you had to do.
And so when I think of Palpatine, I don't think of him as someone who's doing stuff underground where he'd be getting Sith artifacts and stuff like that.
Well, it doesn't have to be purchasing things.
No, but you know what
They
I
were
mean?
doing
Like
some shady stuff.
okay, but my point is there weren't leads for
Yeah.
the Jedi to go after.
I get
They
your
had the
point.
Force.
Well, apparently the Force didn't want to show them these leads.
Or maybe they weren't
Looking.
doing a lot of looking.
I don't know. I just think that
Because I mean,
Alright.
to be fair, one could argue that the war was the distraction for the Jedi to keep them from actually locating the Sith Lord.
Oh, I think
Because they
100% that is
Because they
real.
literally, I mean, it wasn't the first purpose, but it was a side effect. And then they literally found out, they discovered who the Sith Lord was, right as freaking Mace Windu basically is getting his hand chopped off. Like they had literally like an hour beforehand being like, "Oh shoot, man." So just so happens that the guy that's leading the Republic is actually the Sith Lord. Like, it's way too late. Like, dude, come on. These are like, and again, I know that it's easier said than done, and I know that we have all of the context, but it's like, at what point do the finest minds in the Jedi Council, the most powerful Jedis, come together and start like putting things together and being like, maybe the Sith aren't just like hiding in the background. Maybe they're at a central point in this whole thing.
well, they knew that
The Senate was under the control of a Sith Lord, but it's like,
yeah.
okay, that's a pretty good lead. Like, sure, there's a lot of senators, but that's like, maybe, I don't know, maybe start with the Senate. Like,
Maybe start with
investigating the Senate.
maybe start with the guy who hasn't left and was supposed to leave and somehow got his way to stay longer. Like they could have.
Yeah.
But he loves democracy, and he would put down his power as soon as he could.
Yeah.
But
So-
but also like this kind of maybe a new little direction, but Sifo Dyas was on the Jedi Council and said there's gonna be a war where we need clones. Like
Yeah. Okay.
maybe they could have like listened to him. Like maybe we should figure out like what this vision
Okay.
is actually
see,
all about.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. That's the other thing. Because like that's one of the other failures. They didn't ask the right questions because they were every time somebody had Force vision, they'd be like, always in motion, the future is. Basically, they just discount it. They're like, don't worry about it. But like, obviously, some of the Force visions were not correct. But then some of them needed to be taken into consideration.
Well, especially like Anakin's. Like he had visions of his
Or,
mom
I don't know,
dying.
like freaking Elzar.
Oh
at
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
at the end of the first book.
Yeah.
Like that's a pretty big deal. And then all of a sudden you get to the second book and he's like, well, dang. Gosh darn it. Maybe we should have done something with that. It's not. He's not that negligent. But like,
But to be
if
said, it's like if they would have took that why Cypher did that in the first place, and maybe took a step back. I'm all
Yeah.
about taking steps back, you guys.
yeah,
And look
like
at the
just
broader
just-
picture, then they could have figured it out.
He's like, yeah, we need to create an army, and then he goes missing.
oh man, that's so coincidental, and we're not going to look into it at all. And I'm
No.
not saying they needed to be paranoid. But
No,
just like
but
be more concerned and more in tune. Like Daddy Pops just said in the chat, every Force vision Anakin ever had came true in some way. Like
yeah,
totally
correct.
right. Like I don't know, maybe the Force shows people something because it's intentional. Like and not because it's just playing tricks on them. It could be different if people were getting Force visions of like freaking Wookiees farming somewhere or something random. Like,
Well, yeah, I mean, some dreams, like, you know what I mean? Like, I
yeah.
don't know. It's just like, yeah, not every Force vision is going to be legit, but if it concerns you enough to bring it up to the Jedi Council, and Obi-Wan's like, man, talks backwards. I don't know. I feel like the more Jeremiah started this whole podcast with such an intense thing, and now I don't even like Obi or Yoda at all anymore.
I will tell you
like,
that there are a lot of redeeming qualities about Yoda that I love.
Well, of
Endearing,
course,
redeeming
of
qualities.
course.
But like, I'll tell you one thing: he was a part of the reason the Jedi fell.
And that's why you had him as a thumbnail, huh?
Ooh.
It was unintentional.
But
Actually, it
No,
kind
the
of.
Force gave
was
you
the
a vision.
Force gave
of
you a
what
vision,
want for a
and
thing.
you
I will tell
went
you
with
that
it.
when I was looking for the character, he was the first one and the only one I found. So, I think there was some intentionality there. But, anyways, I just think that if they had just asked questions and not been afraid to tackle different and tough things rather than just like brushing, because like every time something remotely different happened, they're like, just meditate, it'll be fine. It's like, well, no. I mean, sure.
I mean, they don't want to
There's
act
truth-
on their emotions, though.
And again, coming full circle, it's like, okay, but you don't be ruled by your fear,
Ooh,
but also don't discredit it
true.
as a Jedi. You know, like you don't have to like just completely separate yourself from the. So as I'm reading through this first Bane novel, there's a Jedi named Githany who defects in the middle of the war, and she and Bane are talking in the archives of the Sith Temple, and she's like, I left the Jedi because basically they were blinded by their desire to strip everything that makes us powerful away from us. And she was like, I knew I was never going to reach my full potential underneath that kind of teaching. And all of that to say, again, there needed to have been balance, because there are a lot of things the Jedi taught that were like really good and that were fail safes to prevent people from going unhinged or like losing themselves. But then at the same time, like fear, you can't be ruled by your fear as a human. But fear is a thing that spurs us to action when we need to be sometimes. You know, fear, it can be a very positively compelling thing. So can some forms of, for lack of a better phrase, righteous anger. You know, like seeing people taken advantage of and the anger that comes along with that, and seeing people enslaved or, you know, killed, you know, innocent people being killed just in vain. Like obviously there's some sort of a righteous anger involved with those things that spurs you to action. And so I think there needed to have been a balance of like, sure. Well, I mean, like even Yoda, and this is the interesting thing. So in that arc where he goes to the like Force Nexus thing where he's learning how to become a Force Ghost, right? One of the tasks is he fights his dark side self, like the embodiment of his darkness, and he only wins through acknowledging that it's a part of him. Like,
Yes.
and he says, "I'm not going to allow you to control me, but I acknowledge who you are and acknowledge that you're a part of me, that I am you and you are me." And it's like, there you go. Like, if that's the way you become a Force Ghost, I don't know. Maybe pursue this a little bit more. Let's
figure this out.
I don't know.
You should have went on sabbatical and like made a new course just for the Jedi at the Jedi Temple for Padawans to like learn how to do this at a young age, rather than
They would have not had a good time because it would have been crap. I would have been a consultant.
No, not
But I
you,
also would've been
Yoda.
like-
He's saying Yoda.
I also would have been like, "Yo, guys, I read this book on Darth Bane, and I learned a lot from it." And they
No,
would be
did
like,
you
"Nah,
not?
get
I think
out."
you did. You hear
He
what I
missed
said?
it. Yeah, he missed it.
No.
He's
I
saying
said that
Yoda should have went
Yoda-
on sabbatical.
I
Yoda
heard
should have
you-
went on
I heard
sabbatical.
you should have.
No, I said Yoda should
Sorry.
have went on sabbatical to like make this new class that he could teach about how to become a Force Ghost, and so Padawans and everyone else can learn how to do it. So
Yeah, he
everything
should
that
have.
he learned,
Yeah.
but that was at the end of the war. So
I think another thing too is, I don't know. I just lost my whole train of thought. now.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
Jesus, I had a good
Well,
one too.
All of that to say, I still love. Oh,
Oh.
go ahead.
It came back. I think a lot of the too during the Clone Wars time, it almost seemed like it wasn't, as a Jedi, it wasn't a good thing to be a Jedi. Like having the Force and stuff was more of a burden than a tool. Like,
Ye-
you know what I
I
mean?
mean- Yeah, I mean, because by default it was like, "Oh, you're going to become a general."
Well, not even that. It's just like they weren't able, like you were saying before, like how that Jedi, she left the Order, and because she knew that she wasn't going to be as powerful as she could be under that rule. And I think a lot of those Jedis, because they weren't able to figure out their way through the Force, because there's so many strict things that they have to go through, it seems like sometimes it is a burden to be a Jedi than it is
Oh,
to
okay, I
be
get
a
what you're
good
saying.
thing, because they're not able to actually figure out their way through the Force and figure out,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
express themselves in the right way that the Force is calling them or guiding them to. And it almost
Yeah.
seems like towards the end of the war, it was more like a burden than anything. Like it wasn't a good thing to be a Jedi. Like no one wanted, like you want to, if you were Force sensitive, you probably wouldn't even want to be a Jedi, because like to see how the Jedi were forming and like what they were going through wasn't a desirable thing as a Force user.
Yeah. It's also pretty telling that they took children at a young age.
Kidnap them. And
I'm just gonna put that out there.
also, how I would love to see the numbers of more Jedi that they took during the Clone Wars.
Oh yeah.
Like, what is that number? Like, did it significantly drop off?
I mean, I can't see. The problem is like I wouldn't be able to see the benefit of taking taking more because they're not clones. They still age the same way.
Well,
I would imagine it
yeah.
probably would have stayed relatively steady, if not dropped a little bit.
I just like I think like I feel like a lot of those Jedi's that did do that like found Force sensitive people throughout the galaxy. They weren't able to do that job either because they were so busy during the war. So I feel like
Yeah.
the numbers would be lower.
well, there was that whole arc with the holocron that Cad Bane stole that had the names or locations of Force sensitive children throughout the galaxy. So like they were at least aware of
Yeah.
where they were.
Well, and
Now,
like
whether or not they actually pursued it, we don't know, because like you said, they're busy fighting a war. So
And I mean, like with Anakin, like if he was part of the Republic, they would have found him. Like they said that.
Yeah.
But also, how many parents would? I feel like, as a parent, if I found out my kid was force sensitive, I don't know if I would
Like, heck
necessarily.
yeah.
I don't know if I would want to like never see my kid.
Yeah,
You know what I
but
mean?
I think it was one of those things that was such an honor. Like,
Yeah, that's
Jedi
true.
were so put on a high pedestal that, like, if your kid was, chosen, like, they were, like, you'd want them to do that. But, yeah, I get it. Like,
It's also really lame though.
Well,
Like,
it's
say,
like
hey, I know you have a ton of pride in your newborn child, and I know you're nurturing
you had
a
a
very
sweet
intimate,
baby
very
shower, but you
special.
don't ever get to react with your kid ever. And that 9 months that you carried that kid does not matter to you.
Yeah, thanks for basically doing it for us. Thank
Yeah.
you for having a kid. We can't have kids, but you can have a kid, and we're gonna take your child.
unless you're a Kiadi Mundi, then you can have all the kids you
Well,
want.
that's not canon though.
It's not
Arguably.
canon yet.
It's
Um,
okay.
yeah. So, that was very interesting. It's like, hey, we're just gonna yoink. I'm just gonna take that real quick from you.
It's just an interesting thought, like how, like, did they actually get as many Jedi?
Yeah.
And I feel like probably a lot of that too, like Palpatine probably blinded them to that and blinded the Republic to that too during that time. So as Jeremiah keeps flinging that thing, and I just keep hearing it constantly.
Sorry.
Do we have a new host?
We
Jeremiah's
might.
pin.
I mean,
it's pen and a clothespin, and I'm just
Close-
kind of like twirling it around and.
yeah.
Wow.
And somehow still there'll be another voicemail from one of my things and not Jeremiah, but
Oh, but I saw where some of our. Maybe we should just transition to that.
It's funny
now.
that you say that. That's all I'm gonna say. Anyways, all of that to say, I still love the Jedi dearly.
well, yes.
And I think it's one of those things where I'm more so saddened by the fact that as much as one can be with, a fantasy world, I'm more so saddened that things ended the way that they did.
Well, yeah, it's
because I'm like, you guys, you really could have done it differently. You could have been something more, especially now as we're reading these High Republic novels, and I'm like, yeah, sure, the Jedi.
It's
still have their
definitely
flaws,
bringing it
but,
more
like,
to light now that those books are out.
yeah, and it's also like really making me like that Jedi Order way more. I'm like, oh my gosh, these guys are awesome, and they do a lot. They do a lot of things different, and I think some of it is much better. So
Yeah.
anyways, so what do you, the listener, think about the Jedi? We'd love to know what you think. Send us a voicemail. If you want to know how to do that, stay tuned. The quick answer is there's a link underneath the description of this podcast on the audio version. So check that out.
In every version, honestly, there's a link.
Correct. But speaking of voicemails, let's go ahead and transition to one of my favorite times of the week, voicemail time. You guys ready?
Yes, sir. It's voicemail time.
Why do I not just have you do that?
I don't know. I mean, I could do
Like,
that
why go
every
through the
single
trouble?
time.
Why go through the trouble of making like a little stinger?
It's not trouble. It sounds good. We love it. But
Yeah, but it's not. It's voicemail time.
I mean, you could record that and put that over that whole
No, I want it to be
soundbite.
your voice though.
I could do that for
Oh.
you, and then we could put over the
Ah.
and Jeremiah can harmonize in background.
Hey, Jeremiah, I feel like you'd be a good bass or like a baritone.
What were you? What were you? Nope.
bass.
He said,
He's a
nope.
bass. Yeah,
Were you a bass and choir?
he's definitely not a tenor. I'll tell you that much.
I can be whatever you want.
Oh,
Did you ever do choir in high school or anything?
No.
Don't
What was
say it
that,
like
nerd?
that.
I was in band. Okay, I didn't intermingle with those.
Jeremiah was like, "What was I, nerd?"
As I
a
was in
co-host
band.
on a Star Wars podcast.
and the band.
Nerds are the worst, dude. I just can't stand them.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well,
Okay,
speaking
well.
of nerds, Drew is also a nerd. And speaking of Drews, Drew
Okay.
is the name of the person who sent in our first voicemail. You guys ready?
Solid name. Solid.
Yeah. Here we go.
Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Drew. I'm a college student from Maryland,
Ooh.
and I'm a relatively new listener to the podcast. I want to say I started listening about probably 2 months ago, and even though
Yeah.
I'm kind of new to the podcast, I've probably listened to almost all of your episodes.
Whoa.
I do a lot of driving. I commute
Whoa.
to school. I drive for work, so it's always on in my car, and I love it. And I love you guys, and I love what you guys are doing, and
Thank
keep up
you.
the great work. I do have a question for you guys. I guess this question is kind of more directed towards Andrew.
Hey.
But Andrew, in various episodes, you refer to the fact that you love EU Luke.
Oh,
and
yes.
As someone that's not very educated in the expanded universe, I'd love if you wanted to share what's something you love about the EU Luke that we don't get to see in canon Luke, really. And sorry, Jeremiah, if that question triggers you. Yeah, keep up the great work, guys, and I'll see you. Bye.
Oh, Drew. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome,
First of all,
Drew.
I want to, yeah, welcome. Dude, 2 months. We're nearing 100 episodes, which
Really close.
if an average episode is like 2 hours, which most of them are around that 2 hour mark,
Do the math.
like,
Do the
dude,
math.
that's
Do
a
the
lot
math.
that's a lot of podcast episodes to listen to
That
in 2
is.
months. So props to you, because I don't know if I could do that, and I'm part of the podcast. So, but dude, seriously, thank you so much for being here and for your voicemail. So, yeah, sorry, Jeremiah, but jumping back into for everyone that couldn't see the video, Jeremiah was booing and doing a thumbs down
Yeah.
when he was talking.
So
about
that's why
the
we
EU.
laughed so hard when he mentioned that, because Jeremiah
Yeah,
was
yeah.
literally doing that.
Yeah,
All right, so flex. Go ahead, flex on us, Andrew.
I don't. It's not a flex.
It's a flex. Let's go with
the,
it.
the things that we. So the question was like what we don't see, what we don't get, and I would say it's a lot. Like
Everything.
Yeah, it's pretty much everything. Because like for canon Luke, we have what we have in the Last Jedi. We have what we have in the Mandalorian season 2 finale. Maybe some references here and there in books, but like he's still a very underdeveloped character when it comes to canon post Return of the Jedi. So I guess the main difference is the depth. Like there is so much depth that we don't get in canon, because he continues to be a main character in many of the expanded universe novels, and so with that you get the obvious, character development, the internal, monologues and thoughts, and his journeys in the Force and his journeys as a Jedi Master and then a Jedi Grandmaster. I think one of the coolest things is we see him go through trial after trial and take the hit, learn from it, and get better. And then just kind of all on the like nerdy, just cool side of things. Like he's super powerful. Like I know that what he did in The Last Jedi it's a pretty big flex. It was like if they were going to do one thing, if they were going to put one act of the Force in to that movie to show like how powerful he had gotten, that was a pretty good one, I would say. But there's so much more. There's so many more cool moments and very unique uses of the Force that he shows us in the expanded universe. And so all in all, it's interesting, going back to our Cantina discussion, all in all, I think that he actually did a better job as Grandmaster, in my opinion, because he grew up as a Jedi in such a different world. But that's a discussion for a completely different podcast. So that's kind of it in a nutshell without going into too much detail.
Yeah. And Drew, make sure you join the Discord.
Yeah,
Yes.
if you haven't already, and we just missed you by accident, but Drew, definitely join the Discord.
Yeah.
Well, the first voicemail, we have two. We only have two tonight. The first voicemail was from Drew.
Uh-oh.
The second voicemail is
Oh.
from Drew's keyboard,
Oh.
making its first ever voicemail appearance. Your face, Drew, says it all. You're so done. Let's take a listen to our second voicemail.
I don't type that much, okay? Is this for two? Is this for a whole minute?
Yeah.
Oh Lord. It's still going.
Oh, it's still going.
It'd be really cool if we actually saw, like, got the text somehow of what he was actually saying, the keyboard.
You don't know how to speak keyboard?
It's like Chopper. You know what he says, but you're not like it's.
Yeah.
Well,
thank
thank
you so
you.
much, Drew's keyboard, for being a constant presence on this podcast.
I
and for leaving a
stand by my
voicemail.
statement earlier in the episode of the podcast. If I don't get
I
a
don't know. I think
voicemail,
I think Jeremiah's pin clip thing is it's beginning to make a debut.
I'll just put that down over there.
Tanner out of nowhere, click, 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 click.
Hey, welcome, Tanner.
Do you think Drew's keyboard is related to Click Clack from Rebels?
Ooh. Probably.
Sorry, my silence, everyone who's not watching the video, is putting my head in my hand. It was a good attempt.
That was.
Good attempt. What?
I thought that was pretty there. I didn't. There's no attempt. I thought that was good.
Okay. Well, everyone, thank you for listening so far. We've mentioned a few things, mainly Twitch and our Discord throughout the duration of this podcast. And if you would like to join our Twitch streams, because we do stream the recordings of these episodes with video live, feel free to join us at Empire Radio. Excuse me, not Empire Radio. Twitch.tv/Empire Radio. I literally almost said EmpireRadio.tv/Twitch. That would have been wrong.
Ooh, someday, maybe when we're
Maybe.
big, maybe Twitch will want to come to us and say, "Hey, can we be on your platform?"
But Twitch.tv/Empire Radio every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, and every Friday, as long as the Bad Batch is running. So only a
Alright,
few
two
more
more.
weeks here.
2 more
Yeah.
weeks.
Time flies. Good Lord.
True.
But same time on Fridays, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. And if all goes according to plan, Drew and I will continue to have watch parties before the
Yes.
episodes on Fridays at
There's only 2 more,
7
so I feel like you can commit to 2 more episodes, so I don't have to message you every week.
I thought it was just a given that I was going to be there unless I told you otherwise.
I mean, it can be.
All
Let's
right.
do that.
All right, let's do that.
So, anyways, so you can join us on Twitch, and if you want to join the Discord, you do need the invite link to do so. But that can be found if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast. There is a link underneath the description. There's a section that says "Connect with us," and then right under that, it's links.co/Empire Radio. You can actually type that in if you're curious. Links with 2 I's. .co/Empire Radio. And it is a landing page that includes all of our social media links. It'll include the Discord link in that as well, and a link, if you can't find the first one, in the description to leave a voicemail. So you can leave a voicemail. You have up to a minute, and you can do exactly what you heard Drew and Drew's keyboard do tonight. If you want to leave us a question, it does not have to be Star Wars related. You could ask Drew what his favorite keyboard is, or his favorite gnome, or whatever you want to ask.
Well, I should say, and we didn't really discuss this yet, so hopefully I'm not jumping the gun. But
Ooh.
in 2 weeks from tonight,
Yep.
it is our 101st episode of Empire Radio, and so So our 100th episode is going to be on the Bad Batch finale, which is just a nice coincidence. But for a special celebration of 100, we're going to do another AUA, right?
Correct.
All
So
right.
this is our official announcement. We are doing
This is
another
a good
Ask Us
reminder,
Anything.
Jeremiah, that you mentioned this now because they need a couple weeks to
Yeah.
Yeah.
do it.
So
perfect.
So if you're on the Discord and you were in the Discord during the last one that we did, there will be a channel set up for that. Don't worry about that. You can leave your questions there. Just hold your horses. Get your questions ready. That'll take care of it. But if you're not in the Discord and you want to ask us a question, now is your chance to get a voicemail in.
yeah, and if you're gonna, you have 2 weeks. If you want to have it saved for the AUA, just say right away in the beginning of your voicemail, save this for the 101st episode AUA.
There's actually an easier way to do that.
Oh,
That allows me to actually not have to listen to it and spoil some of it.
Ooh.
So when you leave a voicemail, there's a spot for you to leave your name, unless you have a Anchor account. But I think you can leave it without an Anchor account. You don't have to have one.
right.
And so just put your first name and then AUA behind it. So for me it'd be Andrew space AUA, Drew space AUA, whatever. And that way, when I'm going through the voicemails, especially next week, because we'll do voicemails, we do them every Tuesday. So I'll do it next week, and I'll be able to skip over the ones that have an AUA. And if for some reason you can't add that, do what Jeremiah said. Say, hey, this is for the AUA episode.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so we're gonna devote that whole episode to just us answering your questions, and
Yep.
don't ask us. You can't ask us Star Wars stuff, but we prefer don't ask us Star Wars stuff. If you want to know something like what our favorite color is, if you want to know what our dream vacation is, if you want to know
Whatever, it doesn't matter as long as you ask
It's-
us questions.
and it's family friendly. Like
Oh, that
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
That too.
Yeah. Keep anything that wouldn't be put in a Star Wars movie out of your voicemails.
So if you want to talk about
keep it
killing
clean.
kids, you can do that.
Yeah,
No,
go right.
Let's not do that. You get what
yeah.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
But also, like we said, we'll have a thing in our Discord too, where if you just wanted to submit a question, just that way we'll go through them. But yeah, so if you've never sent in a voicemail, if you've always wanted to but been worried to, like scared to, whatever, just do it this time. Like
This is your time.
we're gonna devote the whole episode to this kind of stuff. So the more the merrier for the voicemails.
Yes.
And it's a lot of work for Andrew because he can only fit so many sound bites in the thing.
It's gonna be a lot of work, but it's gonna be a
He'll
lot
have
of
to-
shuffling around live.
Yeah.
But yeah, and here's the thing: if you want to leave us a question, you don't want us to play the voicemail because you don't want to have your voice on air. That's also 100% fine. We will do that for you. We've actually done that in the past. It's not a big deal. We'll just listen to it ahead of time. We'll get the question and we'll answer it in. We'll just throw it in the middle of some of the voicemails. So don't worry about that. And again, like Jeremiah said, I would actually prefer to answer some questions that are non-Star Wars related.
Yeah.
Because we do, obviously this is a Star Wars podcast. We do a lot of talk about what our views are of the Star Wars universe, what our theories are, what our favorites are, what our, we've talked about that a lot. So it's like, I know for a fact that I've answered like my favorite EU character or like my favorite things about the EU like 5 times already. and I don't mind answering that question because I love, no matter how many times I'm asked, I love answering that question. But at the same time, like we talk about Star Wars a lot. So
Well-
either think of something like super random and kind of off the wall about Star Wars, or just ask us something personal because this is a celebration of 100 episodes of us recording ourselves talking to you
Correct.
about Star
Yeah.
Wars. And so it's a celebration of that relationship. It's not just us being like, yeah, we made it through 100 episodes, suckers. Yeah. It's like, no, we want this to be about the community and the relationships that we form. So feel free to ask us personal things.
Also, this would be a really good episode to join the Twitch live stream too. So if you've been debating on catching these episodes live, this would be a good one too because we will also answer questions live.
Yeah.
That
I
on
will
Twitch chat. So
I reference the Twitch a relatively good amount, but like I'm gonna be watching the Twitch during that stream, and actively responding to people either live in the recording or via the chat. So like that's going to be the one where it's going to be way more informal. We can actually talk.
Yeah.
We can interact with people in the chat. So like it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Like, for instance, Daddy Palps just asked a question. Did it hurt falling off the snowbank at the church parking lot? Question mark. And Jeremiah will
Yes.
give. Oh, I was gonna say Jeremiah will give the answer on that. Oh, but I guess go ahead.
Well,
Jeremiah.
Also, he also asked our favorite pizza order, which I'm not going to answer yet.
Ooh.
But these are good examples of what we will be reading and talking about next episode. Our 101 episode. And I'm excited. And I mean, at the end of the day, we made this podcast because we love Star Wars. We love talking about Star Wars, but we also love the community of Star Wars. And this podcast is for you guys too.
Yeah, for
More
sure.
than anything. So,
And you don't even have to ask a question. If you just want to submit a comment of like, hey, thanks for the thing, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know,
He
if you
said,
wanna,
thanks for the thing, blah, blah, blah.
yeah, whatever you want to say. Like, you can just, just give a little, just your thoughts on what the podcast means to you, or just, like some of you have told us, like, you're just driving to work listening. It's like, tell us how you listen. Like, do you just sit in the car and drive and listen to us, or do you, like, intently sit down at your desk in your room and just, like, focus and just, like, take in every word? Like, let us know. We'd love to hear.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, back when I listened to our episodes a lot back when I was commuting and then teaching, because I would be driving from house. I'd be in the car so much. And then of course, bro, 4:30 p.m., 35W South. GG.
Oh, yeah. GG, you're on there.
Yeah. So, anyways,
Yeah.
So that's 2 weeks from now. It will be the 17th. So it'd have to be submitted by 7 p.m. Central Standard Time.
correct. And that's a hard cutoff, because for a little bit of context, and this is another thing. Ask us behind the scenes questions,
True.
Yeah.
because I'm about to tell you something about the behind the scenes. So to give you context, I have to download all of these MP3s, and then they don't come as MP3s. So I have to download them all, throw them into Logic,
Make them MP3s.
make them all MP3s, and name them. So I have to listen to all of them, at least the first like little chunk, make sure I have the names correct, export them into a folder, and then import them into the podcast recording app that we use to do this remotely. So I'm hoping and I'm assuming that there are going to be a lot of them. So 7 p.m.
Put Andrew to work.
7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. That's your hard cutoff. If it comes in after that, I'm sorry. It's
the
not
next week.
happening. Yeah. So, anyways,
I just hope your computer doesn't crash under all the pressure.
nah, it'll be fine. I think it'll be fine.
I'm excited, you guys. We did.
Yeah.
It's gonna be dope.
Yeah.
All right.
Anything else?
Nope.
No, I think this is a good episode.
Yeah, I do too.
I don't like Yoda anymore, so that's interesting.
Oh.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
All right, everyone. Well, you have been listening to another Wizard episode of the Empire Radio Podcast. I'm Andrew,
I'm Jeremiah.
I'm Drew.
and may the Force be with you.
Oh.